Wicked Part 1 on Thursday night, and then I went straight into an early screening of Wicked for good the very next day. My brain is still somewhere in Oz, my emotions are on a broomstick, and my sense of time is sort of destroyed. But welcome to the podcast. I'm Abdullah, and today we're going to talk about Wicked for Good. It's the 2025 sequel to Wicked, directed by John M. Chu. It's the second half of the musical, and it's supposed to tie us right up to The Wizard of Oz from 1939 with Judy Garland. Or at least that's the idea. So we'll get right into it. So I'll start with the big question. Did I actually like this movie? And the answer would be kind of. I'm not sure. Because on the one side, you've got this big emotional core of Faba and Glinda and their friendship and their fallout and the question of who gets to be good in the story, which I feel like was a central feature in this. Okay, you're trying to put both of them in these boxes because that's what you've seen happen in the original film, 1939 wali mein, where there's a evil witch and there's good on the other side. And I think the filmmakers and the writers, they really play around with that, and they really make you think that way, and until you realize, oh, there is no good or bad, And Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande are really doing the heavy lifting emotionally, and you can feel the film really trying to land that heartbreak and that, oh, we'll never see each other again, but I still love you energy. But on the other side, there's this story structure and the pacing that are fighting them the whole way, which is very frustrating to watch. I mean, they really tried to conclude all Oz films with this one and tried to connect the film with the 1939 film as well as the previous film. And it was, at times, there was some plot holes, and it was just, the writing was weirdly lazy. Sometimes it was rushed. In some places, it was too predictable. So overall, it wasn't a disaster. There were moments there I genuinely liked and that really got me. But as a movie, and especially as a sequel that's supposed to be the big epic for good conclusion, it's messier than it should be. And if you love Wicked the part 1, I think you'll probably see this no matter what I say. So the question is more, how annoyed are you willing to be at the pacing and timelines, or are you just able to look at it for what it is? I want to start with the thing that I actually liked, which was Glinda and her character. The reason I liked her was because while watching the film, I didn't like her. And it was after watching the film that I thought, you know what? That's one thing that really had my mind going there for a bit and just gave me some food for thought. So isn't that what it's all about? And so Glinda in this movie, she isn't a neat, shiny, simplistic good witch, or she's messy. She's scared, she's ambitious, she's complicit in a lot of things that happen, and that ambiguity is probably my favorite part of the whole film. So there's moments where you genuinely feel bad for her, where everything's falling apart. The man she loves Elphaba, and he's leaving her for him, and she can't run away, and she has these responsibilities that she's to the town of Oz that she's supposed to fulfill, and people are looking at her for answers, and she's way out of her depth. But then in the same breath, you're like, wait, are you kind of sabotaging Elphaba, and are you just trying to secure your man and your status while pretending it's all for the greater good? And she wants to marry Fiyero, and she wants to keep her place in Oz, and there are choices that make her feel selfish and small but human at the same time. And in a very big mythic story like this, I actually do kind of love that, and I love that you can't stamp her as pure good. And the film really does lean into that, because it keeps putting her in this position as the face of Oz and the public image and the pretty poster girl, while the regime behind her is doing some pretty nasty stuff. And she's not the mastermind, but she's also not innocent. So she's benefiting from the system even as it crushes her friend and her at times. And that tension between Glinda and the friend and Glinda and the symbol is way more interesting to me than a straightforward good witch, bad witch divide. And on the flip side, you've got Elphaba becoming more and more of a sympathetic figure. And I don't think that's a bad idea at all, trying to show someone who gets labeled wicked by the people in power. But the movie pushes that so hard, it starts to feel irreconcilable with the 1939 film that it's supposed to be leading into. It really wants you to see her as misunderstood, and that's compelling until you realize that they've bent the story so much to make her sympathetic that it doesn't quite line up with the classic Oz anymore. Which, to be fair, is also kind of the point. But it does create this weird tension. But leaning further into the pacing and time problem, that's where the movie does start to lose me, kind of, because the film, it tells us that a bunch of time has passed since the events of part one. Years have gone by, Oz has changed, people have moved into new rules, politics have shifted, and on paper that's fine. But the problem is, it doesn't feel like time actually has passed. So you don't really feel you don't really see the massive reshuffling of Oz. You're just told, okay, we're here now. And Glinda is the face of the wizard's regime. Elphaba is in hiding. Nezeros and Bok feel like totally different people. And the world has supposedly evolved, but the movie doesn't really show its homework, if you will. And when we hit Act 2, this is where the pacing really becomes an even bigger problem. Because once Dorothy lands in Oz, it almost feels like the Wicked narrative is over, and we've been hijacked by the Wizard of Oz. And suddenly scenes start lining up with the classic story. And Nessa gets killed by Dorothy's house. Glinda sends Dorothy off on the yellow brick road, basically, immediately, and Fiero gets dragged off right in front of Glinda and Elphaba. Elphaba goes home very quickly, casts a spell, hoping to save him, and then in what feels like seconds, Dorothy and the gang are already at the wizard store. It's like the movie is sprinting to catch up with someone else's plot. And you could almost feel that John M. Chu is like trying to do whenever we're not watching these characters, the events of the 1939 film are happening somewhere else in Oz. And it's a cool idea in theory. I mean, don't get me wrong, but in practice, the timelines just don't match neatly. And as someone who really loved the original film, the classic, the movie, it's just hard to reconcile. And the movie opens by telling us that time has passed. Then the events leading up to Dorothy's landing seem to take a few weeks at most. And after she lands, everything suddenly feels like it happens over like 2 days. It's not the worst pacing in cinema history, but in comparison to part one, which actually took its time setting up the world and the relationships, for good, definitely feels more disjointed. And you constantly just off balance. How long has it been? Why did the character flip like that? Are we rushing because the plot demands it, or is it because of all the songs? And that's something that got me thinking about an even bigger topic, which is, are musicals over? Is the time for musicals done? Because obviously there was a time for them when they used to be the biggest thing, with Singing in the Rain and West Side Story, and we've all loved those. But in today's day and age, like every day and age, the audience goes in with some expectations. So if you're a Bollywood fan, if you're going to see a Bollywood movie, you know there's going to be songs and there's going to be musicals, and that's just a given. But I feel like as we're going on with time, the expectations of the film watcher or the film goer in Western films, their expectations have changed in a way where they're looking for more realism, and they're looking for films that depict real life as well as possible. And the better they do that, the more we appreciate the film. And in comparison, back in the day when you used to watch a film, many people just wanted a spectacle. They wanted something to take them out of their ordinary lives. And that's why musicals were such a treat. They were a treat for the eyes, these big, massive productions like the original Wizard of Oz. And to this day, if you're going to Broadway, you know what to expect if you're watching a Broadway musical or something. But if you're going to watch a film, I don't know if musicals are the way to go if you want to appeal to the masses and want to create this big production. Because I constantly felt that in the people that I was watching the movie with, actually, where whenever there was a musical, it wasn't adding to the story. It was just an interruption, which was bothersome at that point. And now I'll wrap up this episode with our usual little outro game, which is Broom or Balloon. Which, if you're new here, which let's be honest, you probably are, this is where I decide whether a movie takes the broom, meaning I'm riding with it, or if it gets the balloon, which is if it quietly floats away and my brain won't ever give it any more time. So for Wicked, I think I'm leaning more towards the balloon side, because I'm into a lot of the parts of the film, and The characters are messy, and it tries to poke holes in the whole idea of good versus wicked, which is a good approach, and to sort of recreate and fill the gaps in the original film and the way they connected it. It was a good approach, and I did appreciate it at times. And obviously, there are moments where the music and the performance and the visuals they really line up, and you remember why the story has such a grip on people. And with the 3D, which I think was a brilliant idea, it made it for an interesting viewing experience, which I don't regret. But I think the pacing, first of all, absolutely tested my patience, and the time and just the characters, they're so undercooked, and it's just such an uncontrolled chaos, the whole film, and it's so desperate to glue it to the 1939 version that I don't know if it's something that I can put myself through again, to be honest. And there are characters such as the guy who was with Nessa, who was in love with Glinda, but once he confessed of his love to Glinda to his wife, it was never spoken about again. And what was that about? The ending, there were so many holes that were just left there, so many threads that weren't connected. And that's why it's a difficult viewing experience for anyone who has any context of what the Oz films are and have been in the past. But if you're just going in for a good time, for just wonderful visuals and a treat for your eyes, I think this might be the movie for you. But I don't know if I can go through that again. But that's where I would end this. And just like every week, I'm gonna leave you with one last question, some food for thought, which is it time for musicals to be extinct from the big screen? So think about that. Let me know in the comments below. Watch the film, engage with my opinions, contend with them as you may. It's a free world, you've got free will. And let me know what you think. I'll be back next week with probably a very different kind of film to this. And see you then. Signing off from Unqualified but Correct. This is your host Abdullah. See you.